Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about the psychology of the lower world. And you are thinking about explaining this more clearly for everybody to work on it within yourself and then think it out in your way how you could work this out. What you start out with is saying that we have to learn the difference between, you have two types of thinking, which you say one is reflective thoughts and the other one is reflective thoughts. And either one of these will bring you to a whole other pole in the spectrum of the psychology we're talking about here. And we are right in the middle. So the reflective thought is not the same as reflexive. Could you say what's the difference?
Yeah, well, it really, it all hinges on these two different, you could call them if you wish, forms of thought process, forms of thinking if you wish. And so what you find is then that the reflective mode, that's a mode where you will tend to be in a kind of a self-observation mode, if you wish. And in a prior video, I discussed that in terms of guarding the temple. It means that your attention is obviously goes outside, but then it comes back. Your attention is like that energy. Really, your most important energy is your attention. So it's extremely important what you're doing with your attention.
Focus.
Yes, but often people don't really understand what, when you say focus, what you're actually saying. You're actually referring to reflective thought process, where you are. So, for instance, in tennis, you would get that. In the last final, they said that Djokovic, the number one, he at the end he lost because basically his mind. This is literally the way the commentator put it. His mind wandered off during the game because his grandfather died, and what they mean with wandering off is distracted. He could not focus. But it's not just focus. People make a mistake and they think focus is focusing on something. But what focus means is that you are focusing on yourself in a certain activity. You're focusing on a certain, not just on an activity, but on yourself in a certain activity. So what they're actually saying is that you're focusing on yourself, and that's the essence. So when they say focus, they're actually referring to what I would call concentration, and the word concentric, center, around the center, and the center is the self. So when you see these tennis players that are in what they call in the zone, they're extremely concentrated, meaning their attention is very much on themselves within the activity that they're doing, of course. But this is a little bit of a digression, but the idea is, yes, that you have this reflective thought process, which is what I called last time also the third person perspective. And then you have reflexive thought process, which comes from the word to reflect, the word reflex, meaning, for instance, to make that clear, you would be then caught in a thought process where you're very reactive. Reflex means like if a knee-jerk reaction, I hit you and your knee. There's no choice in reflexive thought. It is very reactive. It is in first person, so that you're very close, attached up too close to what you're thinking about, and you are in first person. So the idea would be then that if you were to catch, somebody in the first person, in reflexive thought and not in reflective thought, would basically be moving forward, not based on their own process, but really remote controlled from outside. And basically in a very divided state, in a split state, where, for instance, the person, the observer, would be not aware that the observed would be connected. So that would be what you would really see. What that really means is that you would be in a certain state of split, while in reflective thought, the shape of the thought, the energy would be then circular. Because, for instance, what I'm seeing out there, I would, for instance, be aware that it's a projection, meaning I would be the energy would be coming back to me. It would be recycled, while reflexive thought would be the energy would be just directed outward. So you would get someone that would be constantly talking about other people or about external things in a very incontinent way, while a very simple example, somebody in the reflective mode would say, not you are this and that. They would say, I feel, or my interpretation is, or what I am hearing is that you are saying this and that. So that's a third person statement. And the reflexive part stance would be more like you are that and you are this, and it would be a very flat first person, too close situation where there is really no inner, there's no self in that process, no inner, no center, no consent. It's not concentric.
Mm-hmm. It's not circular.
Right.
The center is between you and something else outside. It's just
exactly
defensive.
Yes, and you are basically hijacked by the surroundings.
Yeah, and somebody else dictates what's happening.
Basically.
Or your mood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. You
You change my mood.
Yes.
You make me mad.
Right, and it's very good to focus on that, because everybody is now and then in reflexive and now and then in reflective, and it's very good to be very mindful of yourself when you are in the reflexive mode, because you will indeed say, you are making me mad. And the truth is, you have to say, I am letting you make me mad.
Yeah.
So in reflective thought, there is choice. You see, so that's where it all changes, the whole process. What I have found is that when you are in reflexive mode, thought process, and these are like the settings. This is like the settings you can choose on your computer, as it were. You can, like, because this is before the thought process, as it were. This is like the template.
Yeah.
So when you're in a reflexive.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I understand the settings. It's like your Facebook. You put certain settings, and this is how you want to run your program.
Right.
Right.
And the important part of the settings is that once they are chosen, and once you are stuck in a certain setting,
Yeah.
You almost like run on automatic pilot within that mode. And then, so that's the problem with it, because you are.
Yeah, it's very one dimensional. It's like Google. Like after a while, you will get these ads that they think they figured you out, and you get like you are being put in a certain category, and maybe something has changed and you're really not no more in that setting, but there's no choice no more. There's no spontaneity. It's just set in stone.
Right. Yes, exactly. And it's almost like the state before the thought, because that what we're talking about here is that once you're in either state, then the whole thought process is based on that shape.
Right, the setting.
Right, and so that's why it's so difficult, because once
Yeah.
you're stuck, and what is very important to make this yet clearer is that once you're in, for instance, the reflexive mode, and I'm trying to speak very much in terms of the direct experience of people, because everybody is going to be able to see this, because so what you get is that you need what I've spoken about is that there's this stairway, and then reflexive thought basically directs you downward stairway, and reflective thought changes the direction upward. And people would experience that in terms of a spiral. People would say that I'm in a downward spiral. So, or in an upward spiral, meaning that everything follows suit. So once you're in this reflexive mode, you're like stuck in this, your energy, your attention is stuck in a downward spiral. And people would come in and say that, for instance, yeah, I'm stuck in a downward spiral. It's just, everything keeps getting worse. And that's because you're stuck in this reflexive setting. And the moment somebody were to shift to a third person perspective, and it's not easy. Once you're really stuck in first person, you're really like stuck there. But the moment you start to reflect and take on a third person perspective, you literally feel as if the energy changes its shape. And then what happens is that there's this upward spiral. You start to go up the stairway, and which is the steps are frequencies. And then when you go up the stairway, then all of a sudden you start to feel lighter. The downward spiral is a heavy feeling, and you start to feel lighter. You start to so the density, literally, in what happens in the body is the atoms, is that the density changes. So you get a lighter, the body becomes lighter, and at the extreme of that, you get the whole idea of ascension. But we all basically start ascending when we are in the reflective mode, and meaning you start to ascend in frequency, or you start to decrease the level of density in your body, because the ultimate illusion, of course, the ultimate polarity illusion is that mind and body are separate. But that's it. So what we're talking about here is the basic. This is the way your mind governs your body, because if you're given the state reflexive or reflective, you're going to get the state of the density. Everything. So when you go up to the stairway, you have then at the highest end, you get then the idea of a light kingdom, and at the lowest end of the stairway or the spiral, you get then the dark kingdom. And then one would say that we are in a frequency of what in the Lord of the Rings would be called the Middle Earth. You see, and when you know these are like the keys to decode these stories, because the stories will tell us where we are at. Science is still stuck in the reflexive approach, which is when you're basically studying your own projections, not aware that they're your projections. And this is why the mirror is like such a fundamental image, because when you're so to become reflective, you need to be aware that what you're looking at out there is your own projection. So you wouldn't study that as something external. So the whole idea would be then that, right, so science could never give us this multi-dimensional map that we're talking about here.
No.
Because science would basically be stuck in Middle Earth, studying projections.
Studying the program they created.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And studying a reality that is basically illusional, because they're stuck in this first person perspective, and trying to understand the world from out of a first person perspective, which is completely it's almost like playing the video game as the avatar inside it and not seeing the avatar. So then you get a completely disfigured understanding. But the myth, why I said this, but the mythology, and which is what you get in the Lord of the Rings and in the Harry Potter and all of these, the Wizard of Oz. What you're getting in mythology is a multi-dimensional map based on this spectrum or this stairway. You see, so the stairway is actually the rainbow. And then you get the idea that at the end of the rainbow you get the gold. And the gold would then be when you're at the highest level of reflective thought on the one hand, or at the other hand you would get the lowest level, the highest level of reflexive thought. And then so these myths so then they show you that at the lowest end of the rainbow, which is really the lowest end, you get then the Emerald City of the Wizard of Oz, which would be then this radioactive green city, which would then be the split of the atom. The atom is the self, and then at the higher end you would get the New Jerusalem, which would then be what you graduate towards at the beyond reflective thought, which would then be the whole work of Jung and the whole idea of the teachings of know thyself and the splinter and the beam. So all of these teachings, so you would get then that these teachings are of the reflectiveness is to get you up to go on to the higher kingdom. And then you have the lower, and then but the myth is the map, and science will only get at one level on this stairway, and the level where you are stuck in an illusion, which is what Buddhism calls the desert of illusions, where you're basically stuck in the idea that out there is loose from you, and right. So you see, Buddhism in its true essence is a contemplative practice. So reflective thought you could say that is contemplation. You would get real meditation, real contemplation, and real, for instance, prayer is supposed to be reflective thought. All of these are forms of reflective thought. But now they're being used in a very reflexive form to what you call then to get to bliss people out, and that's a whole new story also.
How would you be praying in a reflexive way then? What would be the wrong prayer? Give me money, please.
Exactly. I've spoken so often about this in terms of that you really need to learn how to pray. Because it's not just pray. If you want to pray, meaning you want to connect to the what you would call then the white sun, which would be the wholeness at the level at the other end of the rainbow, you could never reach there just in being split, and then you want to try to talk to the higher source. You would have to get into the what we would call in Jungian psychology the self mode. And then from that state there would be a connection. So true prayer would then be contemplative, meaning you would have to focus on yourself, reflect. And yes, so the whole idea then of God, take away this burden from me and save me, and it's all wrong. It's all reflexive prayer thought process to like take away the shadow.
It's not based on self-awareness. It's not based on consciousness.
Exactly, at all. And this is why the contemplative traditions all basically are saying that to get to the higher spiritual levels, you have to go through the idea of know thyself, which is reflective thought. So then in the East, you would have to like undergo 20 years, if you wish, of practice to be able to get into that reflective mode in which a connection to the source would become possible. So yes, it has been completely misconstrued and applied in terms of the whole idea of splitting the mind up.
Yeah. Constantly I get back to this point of this splitting the man and the woman, the feminine and the masculine, and I'm like thinking now in this way that maybe reflexive thinking is more based on a masculine program, and then once you try to change that and you would like maybe become reflective, then you would ask yourself, okay, do I have a choice here? It's not really like what we are now more in the mode of, okay, we gotta find answers and solutions and we gotta fix this, and while reflective is actually taking the long road, and then you just have to wonder, okay, why am I mad? It's more like reflective is more like the feminine. It's like maybe nurturing that anger. Okay, why am I angry? It's more, and I guess when you change that, then you maybe would come to more self-awareness and say, okay, hey, I am this or I am that, and then like that you grow little by little, but based on awareness, but not based on, okay, what the program is telling me to do now. How am I fitting in this program? Is it your program?
Exactly. Right. The reflexive mode is based on division, right? And the reflective mode is based on union. Exactly. So it would be more feminine, or you could, and the dividing would be more masculine. So, yes, if you wish, the lower kingdom, the dark kingdom, would be a kingdom almost like void of the feminine, a very machine-like, reptilian, robotic place, which would be like the yang in its full extreme, the masculine completely devoid of the feminine, mechanical, metallic, metal.
Yeah.
And then you would get that the higher kingdom, which people would call heaven if you wish, or whatever, but that would be much more feminine. But you need to say that it would be a union of opposites. So, but it would be much more. See, the lower kingdom would, if you follow the whole trail, it's the whole transhumanism idea is basically letting the machines take everything, improve everything.
Yeah.
And the earth is organic and is
Meaningful.
yeah, and that approach would want to leave earth eventually. This is an approach that will eventually take people off earth, because and also make the earth into something very technological and mechanical, and if you wish, get as far as possible from the earth, because that's the feminine. But yes, you see, this is why you need to be able to see that the yin and the yang is red and blue, fire and water. But in all mythology, you would get that. So that's not heaven and hell yet, or the lower and the higher kingdom. But you will find then that always the lower kingdom will be depicted with red.
Yes.
And the higher one with blue. This is in the Matrix also the meaning of the red and the blue pill. because the red is the, so yes, the lower world will be very yang, very masculine, very fiery, mechanical, metallic, and the heaven will be very blue. That will be much more yin. I think this is what you find is back in, but of course it will be an integration of the two. No, it's not going to be feminine alone. The feminine without the masculine is also in a great danger. But it is, I think, if you compare it to the to Earth right now, the pH we need to be healthy. You need your pH needs to be a little more alkaline than acid. This is why you need to eat much greener. You need much more green, much more yin in your diet than yang. But you also need yang, right? It's a more, so I think it's a balance, but with a lot of blue in it, a lot of yin, a lot of feminine.
Yeah, I think the transhumanism is just taking it off the axis.
Right.
It's just totally not human no more.
No.
But on the other side, it's not human no more neither.
What
the
other
city
side?
of light.
What's not human anymore?
Then people are, they're really talking about angels and light beings.
Well, no, because you would get, that's the version that has been sold to us in a very disjointed way. It would not be that. It would be, I believe it will be very, very Earth-like, but in its original state. So we already get glimpses of it now. And when the Earth is already very heavenly, if you see the synchronicities and you see the way the Earth is conscious, and you would just get more of that. So you would have a much more intimate interaction between us and nature, almost like direct. So it's not this etheric heaven, abstract, ghostly place. I think that's the way it has been programmed into us, like in a way to make you not want to go there or whatever, make it some otherworldly place. To the contrary, I think it's just it's super, what we are now experiencing is like an illusion, but there is a lot of reality still. For instance, real food, real nature is still very real. People, so you would get that. You would get real reality. It would just be extremely real, the real thing. Like now we're sometimes
cut off of nature.
Yes.
And now you would be more integrated and
Yes.
conscious and aware of nature.
Yes.
And how you are part of it.
Yeah.
And everything is.
It would be like a paradise. And nature would be like just 10 times more beautiful and much more colors and much more light and much more. You have glimpses of it now on Earth, just like you have glimpses of hell. So it's right, according to me, the two extremes of the spectrum are right here on Earth.
Yeah, depends where you look, where your focus is, where your attention is.
Exactly, and also depending on your frequency.
Yeah.
So people that are starting to ascend on the spectrum, they start to see that world already. So you get someday, I have days that I'm like really looking at nature and like telling people, it's so beautiful, it's so, do you see, like, but so that's, it's not that it's a different place. We change our frequency and start to see what is there. Like now we're really restricted in our spectrum, electromagnetic, in what we see and what we experience. but people that are ascending, they just start to experience much more of what is there.
Yeah, we have been very much desensitized
Yeah.
by a lot of things. Yeah, including I was looking at a video of Jamie Oliver, this chef from the UK, and he was really making a case for that school we got to teach the children food. He was in the States and he was showing them all kinds of different vegetables, and nobody even knew what a potato was. These are just 4 or 5 year old kids. They don't know what a potato is. They know a carrot, they know an apple, but the rest they know nothing. And his case is okay. You're giving them computers, you're giving them all this fancy stuff, and everybody has a BlackBerry or whatever. And he's just bringing it all back to nature and saying, okay, we gotta really teach these children what food looks like, what the colors of the food are, what the food tastes like. Let's make food, let's taste the food, healthy food, and just go back to understanding and being aware of what it is, because we don't even know what things smell like no more.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
very nice.
But that's it. You. That's exactly it, because the BlackBerry and the computer or whatever.
Yeah, the focus is on the grades, and we gotta get in the
Yeah.
right year, and not too young, not too
Yeah,
old, and,
and
it's a rat race.
And it's also a virtual reality, because
yeah,
you can say that the machine world at the end, it's almost like you achieve immortality by uploading your mind into some machine, and then you think I'm immortal, but it's really a fiction. It's really a 2D fiction, because the real reality is the fruits and the trees and people, and it's just going to, like, for instance, the more you ascend, the more you, because what happens is that you it's almost like you create a new sense, which is already there. Everybody has it, but has moments of it, and that new sense, with that you're able to experience what you would call then paradise, but it's not something like new, otherworld. It's right here, right now, and it's just that you get that sense that opens you up to it. And we know that now what we're experiencing with the five senses is extremely narrow,
right.
and it's like almost like just a cartoon of true reality. So all these people that have awakened spiritually, they relate to us a reality that they have awakened to, that is like, let's say we are experiencing 200 colors, and they would say, no, it's really 5,000 colors. You're not getting, your software is not able to translate what is outside there into experience. So basically, because that's what the whole point, you are basically translating what is out there. And so, right, exact. So the whole point becomes then that the development of the earth, of the people, had to be much more in terms of the upward, going up the ladder, while, and the going down is basically putting us into this machine, cartoon machine, Disney-ish.
You're deficient.
Yes, while you are wired to be eternal, but and the whole machine idea is, for instance, the human body is extremely meaningful. And then you would get, when I went to study, I literally remember I would be going home on my bike in Amsterdam from the university, and there were moments that I was crying, because they would be brainwashing me that the mind would be this flowchart, this mechanism, just a flowchart, and I would say that but where is, I literally told the professor once in the beginning, where is the mystical, spiritual side? Because I was being shown, I was really being brainwashed to believe that the mind is a machine. I didn't know that at that point. So Middle Earth in the Lord of the Rings, to a very large degree, has been downgraded to very low frequencies of this machine-like reflexiveness, because a machine is reflexive.
Yeah.
This video of this Japanese robot lady that was singing that on television, this idea of this robot, the machine wanting to be human and trying to be human, but the machine is always reflexive because it has no inner self to guide its own behavior. It has to be programmed. So you see the machine wanting to become human while the human wants to become a machine. Very paradoxical. And you have these little girls being really groomed into becoming little dolls. And the more they look like the doll, the dead doll, the more, this is what all these pageants are about, is to become like the Barbie, which is like become the robot, while the robot wants to become human. But that robot is reflexive thought. You're a robot. You've become a knee-jerk reaction to your surroundings, and when you go into reflective thought, then you have this choice. This is what the free will and free choice is all about. And then it's a complete different. So I was going home on my bike, and I would be literally crying because I was being basically indoctrinated to believe that I was basically a machine, and I really couldn't I rebelled, and I could not accept it. Something in me, because most psychology students will believe that, and this is why I often people tell me you're a strange psychologist, because you talk a lot about spirituality, but a real good psychologist has to accept the Kool-Aid that the human being is a machine, really, in essence, because if not, you would have to say that it's a spiritual being. And while the whole psyche revolves around the spiritual core of the mind, it's all about the spirituality. And the only psychologist that really got to that was Jung, and Jung is an outcast in Europe, at the European universities. And I remember this professor telling me when I reached a break point with the professor, because I was hanging more and more towards Jung in my graduate level, and then he says, I would never, in the beginning I felt I was very insulted by this. It took me like years to get over this. But and mind you, this professor was a dropout of a priest school, and then he tells me, says, Dimitri, je hangt te veel naar het goddelijke. You hang too much towards the divine, which is like the way to tell a scientist that you're not scientific enough, because I did not accept that the mind was this. You see, but this is the problem at the outermost layers of the human. It becomes very biological, and very that it reaches a level, so at the surface of the mind it becomes very reflexive, meaning almost like a robot. This is our obsession with robots and computer machines. So if your science gets stuck in this reflexive level, and so of course they tries to make sense of it, and in terms of it being a machine. And this is why science does not understand that that's the surface. And at the deeper levels, at the quantum levels, you get spirit. You see, and this is, so at the university, you are going to be programmed in that surface level And because beyond that it becomes intangible, it becomes quantum, then that doesn't exist because our method cannot.
We cannot measure that.
No. But Jung did, and in the terms of the self with a capital S, Jung discovered that in the core of the mind, we found quantum spirit, and this is why Jung is the outcast. But European psychology, Jungian psychology, had to become Jungian psychology. The general psychology of Europe had to be Jungian. If it had not been hijacked by this machine logic, which is anti-mind, the psyche. If any scholar should rebel on this machine paradigm, which is basically what we call the scientific method now, it had to be psychology, because the mind is very, very close to the spirit. Thoughts are more spiritual than physical, but they're both, of course. But but it's closer. If a physicist completely denies spirit, you could say, okay, they're studying falling apples and what have you. But the psyche is too close to the spiritual to deny that. But most of the psychologists are materialistic and stuck in this. So at the deepest levels of that reflexive thought, you get the archetype of the reptile, which is the cold, almost robot. It's almost a little machine, a reptile. And if you look at these insects, at the lowest level, you get the insects as termites and all of these. What they would call the theriomorphic lower kingdom of bees, and even in a bee you get this beehive idea. It becomes very robotic, and they just serve the queen bee. There's almost no choice. There's all the movies of the ant, that in this ant kingdom, that you have this rebellion, and they want to, because they're all submitted to this beehive. And this is literally what happens at the lowest level of the spectrum. Rainbow, which is what the Emerald City is, but masking itself as the City of Light. And then you get the Wizard of Oz is the Dark Lord. And then there's this is where you get the whole idea of wanting this total control, new world order. With at the top you get this eye, which is in the Lord of the Rings revealed as being the Dark Lord, which would be the queen bee at a very reptilian level of consciousness, where there's no more reflective thought, where the surrounding and the other is experienced as totally loose from the observer, and which is where you get a psychology of a serial killer. Because what separates us from serial killers is compassion and connection. And the more you go into the higher levels, you get Buddhism, where they don't even want to kill a fly, because they're aware that everything is self. But at the level of the Lord Saurian, if you wish, or Voldemort or whatever, it's always depicted as this, with this big snake or reptile. Then you get some being that has no connection anymore to the other or the world, and it becomes extremely mechanical. Star Wars, you get this mechanical machine, and a machine has no feelings. So this is this mainframe thing, which is not even human anymore, is the perfect controller of everything. And there's no feelings, there's no choice, there's no love. But that's I could speak hours about that, but this is what I would call, I was like days and days, it was meditating, and this idea was coming up that I was busy, because it's basically opening up like downloads knowledge, and then it just comes into you. But the word that kept coming was the mind, the fallen mind.
Yeah, because I'm wondering now, why would you choose that? Who wants to choose that to be surfing something that is completely, no, it has no meaning, it has no feelings for you, you're devout, just almost dead.
Exactly. And then you become, according to the reptile, the vampire.
Immortal. That's immortality.
But it's not. But there's no individuality, and then you become this reptile vampire. Then lives off of, you become cattle or energy for it or whatever. And this is why Jung said that the human being resists by nature its demise as an individual. It wants continuity. It wants a self. It doesn't want to become just one hive mind. You see, and at the other end, you get then, if you wish, the idea of Jesus, which would be the leader that sacrifices himself for the people, which is total compassion and love. You see, while the other one is the reptile that is that has no feelings and that will sacrifice you for itself. You become the sacrifice. And we know all of this because the true leader will die for his people. And the other way around, you will be sacrificed for the leader. So why this is so important is that in this form you get really, it's not just being, you understand it. You see it, and that's, I think, my work. To not just tell it, decipher, but there's a logic to it, and we all are part of this falling mind. We all reach to reptilian levels of consciousness. We have a reptile brain. So we're part of the Middle Earth is part of a spectrum that reaches way into the underworld and way into the higher world. And this is why you see in this world now two worlds being formed. And one is that world that is very much merging with the Dark Kingdom, which is the whole idea of vampires and zombies and robots and all of that. And then you have the other side where people are really, so you have on this earth now basically human angels walking around, and you have vampires. And these two worlds are merging with the worlds outside of that spectrum. And this is why it's totally traumatic to look at MTV and these video clips, which is all about zombies and vampires and Hollywood, but which is good to study because it depicts where consciousness is going to or at